Hello, I'm Linda with Thistledown and Company, and today's video tutorial is going to be about paper piecing, except we're not going to use paper. Well, just an example, but today we're going to be using Whisperlite as our foundation instead of paper. There's a lot of advantages that you'll find out. Anyway, Whisperlite is an ultra lightweight foundation that we'll be using for our foundation. And there's no fusible on here, so there's no glue involved. But it's nice and strong and stable and works wonderful for a foundation. You may have seen it in my other tutorials for its other uses. When you buy it, it comes in packaging that tells you about the other uses of Whisperlite, and there's other tutorials. It's sold by the yard, and it's 42 inches wide, and you can find it on my website, along with the patterns and notions that you're going to see here today. So, I'm going to show you how to paper piece with Whisperlite and the advantages of that over paper. So we'll be showing both, and we're going to be using the little bee pattern for an example, and we're going to be making his wing today, because there's a lot of odd shapes in the wing. So we'll get started. Okay, so we're going to start with the pattern. This is our pattern. This is from the Be Kind quilt. And each of these will make a section. So this is the section of the wing. There's a left wing and a right wing. And so we are going to trace this onto Whisperlite. So then the Whisperlite will become our foundation instead of the paper. So here's a paper one. Now we're going to make a Whisperlite one. If you don't want to muck up your pattern with the marker that we're going to be using, you can put a page protector over it. Just a simple page protector or a piece of plastic if you have something around. And then you're going to take your Whisperlite, and I already started this one, and you're going to lay it on, and you're going to pin it. You're going to use flathead pins, and the reason we use flathead pins is, you'll see momentarily, it's pinned in place, is now you're going to take your flat acrylic quilt ruler, any size that you have handy, and you're going to lay it on here to trace the lines. And with the flathead pins, your ruler doesn't rock, so it lays nice and flat, and you can trace. So you're going to trace all the lines. That one I got the pin kind of in the way, but you're going to trace all the lines. The dashed ones you don't have to make dashed. That's going to be your seam allowance when you put the units together. But you're going to trace all the lines, and you're going to trace the numbers, so you know which space is which. So there's 5. I'm going to make it a little larger. There's 6. There's 1, there's 2, and you're going to keep going, and then, ta-da, there it is. So, this was traced from the pattern, so we have space 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? So, now, that's one way of getting the pattern onto the Whisperlite. Another way, if you have a copier printer at home, and it has to be inkjet. It cannot be laser. It has to be an inkjet printer. But we have freezer paper sheets that are cut 8.5 by 11 paper size, regular standard paper size. And what you do is you cut a piece of Whisperlite the size of the paper, or even just slightly larger if you want, and then you can trim it with a rotary cutter so it's exact. Then you're going to iron it onto the shiny side. This is the dull side of the freezer paper. You're going to iron the Whisperlite to the shiny side of the freezer paper sheet, and it will stick. So get it all ironed down, and then you're going to take a piece of painter's tape, and you're going to tape the bottom and fold it over. So you're going to fold over an edge and tape it down, and then you're going to clip the corner and clip the other corner. I only did one that time, but clip the corners, and that's going to make it feed easier into your printer. That way the corner won't curl up as it's feeding in. And then feed it through your printer. And there it is on the Whisperlite. So there's that way, or there's the manual way, whichever you prefer to do. Now, this is the paper pattern, and this is the Whisperlite pattern. When it comes to getting your fabrics cut to fill in these pieces, these are very odd shapes. So if you're using paper, what you have to do is, when you're doing shape 1, you have to make sure that you have enough fabric to cover all of shape 1, middle, plus a 1/4 inch beyond all the lines. So you have to kind of hold it up, and sometimes hold it up to the light to see where your fabric is going to cover it all. And then you kind of cut it out. But you can waste a lot of fabric trying to figure out those angles, and you'll see even more so in a minute. So to get accurate shapes, what you can do is you're going to lay your Whisperlite pattern on top of your fabric. And then you're going to take a friction heat erase marker. And like I said, you want to go a 1/4 inch beyond all the lines that are surrounding number 1. So what we're going to do is, with the friction marker, is we're going to draw a 1/4 inch beyond each line of number 1. And it doesn't have to be an accurate 1/4 inch, but at least a 1/4 inch. It can be a little further. Okay. And then we're also going to go number 1. Mark that. Okay. And when you lift it up, I can darken this in, but you can see that is the fabric shape that we need to fill in space 1. So now you can cut it out, which, ta-da, I already did. So this is number 1, and we are going to, then you'd be setting number 1 on top of the pattern, okay? And with the Whisperlite, you can turn it over, and you can see that you easily are covering a 1/4 inch beyond all the lines. With the paper, when you put it on here, this is a light fabric, so you can kind of see that you've covered it. But when you're sewing, you're going from the other side. So you actually have to flip this. And then, because you're going to sew on the lines, so you can't cover it up. So you have to sew from this side. So with the paper, you have to get it lined up and then flip it over, and you're going to be sewing from this side. With the Whisperlite, it's much easier because you just simply set it on there, turn it over. You can see super easy where you're going to sew, and then we're going to pin and sew. But first I'm going to show you how to cut the rest of our shapes. So shape 1 we have, and we used a friction marker. Well, now all these lines are kind of in the way, so we're simply going to take our iron and touch it to the foundation. Now all those marks are gone, because now we have to finish for the wing our background, and that's with this fabric. So now shape 2 is the next one. So we're going to take and lay this on here again. Here's shape 2, and shape 2, you have to make sure that all these lines, all the way to the outside, that you're a 1/4 inch beyond. Okay, so again, you're going to draw at least a 1/4 inch beyond shape 2. And then we're going to also label it 2. And then cut that out. So we're not wasting all kinds of fabric trying to figure out this shape on paper. It's super easy to see on the Whisperlite what size you need. And then again, we're going to take and get rid of the black lines. But now we have our shape 1 and 2. I'll do one more. So now we're going to do shape 3, which is over in this corner, which again is a very odd shape. So we'll go over here and we'll lay number 3 in the corner here. We've got a 1/4 inch beyond there and beyond there. And then I need to draw this. And now we know that that will cover shape 3. And we're going to mark it 3. And then we're going to cut it out. And then, don't press that up because then that will disappear, the numbers. You don't want your numbers to disappear. So you want your pieces cut out and numbered. Oh, there's 2. And so we've got 3 pieces, and now I'll show you how we're going to sew them together. Okay, now we're going to go to the sewing machine, and I'll show you how this all kind of comes together. So we have our piece 1, which is a really odd shape, and we cut it by tracing it with the Whisperlite. So you're going to put it on your pattern, turn it over, and because the Whisperlite's so nice and transparent, you can see the thread back there. You can see that all the lines for piece 1 are covered and a 1/4 inch beyond, and that's what we want. So now you're going to flip it over, and the next piece is piece 2. Okay, so we're going to be sewing on the line between 1 and 2, the shared line. So we're going to take piece 2 and we're going to put them right sides together and raw edges together, raw edges even. And if you look at piece 2, you can see it's wider on this end than it is on this end. So that's how the piece will be laid, the wider end and the narrower end. So you're going to place that there and put in a pin. But we're not going to be sewing from this side. We're sewing from this side because that's where the line is. So then you can take your pin and move it. Okay. So now we're going to go to the machine. And you're going to sew on the line. You're going to start about a 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch before the start of the line. And then sew directly on that drawn line between 1 and 2. Take your pin out as you approach it. And then continue off the edge of the unit. Okay, so we've sewn on the line between 1 and 2. So now, take it over here, and we're gonna set the seam, and then we're gonna stitch it, and we're gonna flip it and press it. So, and that's basically what foundation piecing is stitch, flip, and press. Okay, so now you can see it's covering space 2. So now we also want to see if the seam allowance is trimmed correctly. We want a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you can see it's a little bigger on this end. So then, here it is, paper scissors. We're going to trim our seam allowance to a 1/4 inch. You could also use a rotary cutter if you wanted. So, but you want to make sure that the Whisperlite is folded out of the way, otherwise you'll cut it off. So there's piece 1 and piece 2. So the next piece is piece 3, and that's down here in this corner. And again, piece 3, it's wider here than it is here. So that's how the piece will be laid on. And it's going to be raw edges together. And I kind of like to test fit them. Kind of go like that and see. Yes, that's going to cover. So you lay it on there, flip it over, get your raw edges evenish, put in a pin, and then again you're going to start a little bit before the beginning of the line, and you're going to stitch right on the line. And that's the line between 1 and 3, the shared line of the pieces. And then you're going to stitch off the edge of the unit. So we've sewn between 1 and 3 on that line and off the edge, beyond the outer line. And so we're going to go over here and press. Okay. Ta-da. And line shape 3 is covered. So now, again, we want to trim our seam allowance, because again, you can see it's bigger than a 1/4 inch. And there's our seam allowance trimmed. So we have 1 and 3. Now piece 4 is up here, and it's an odd piece. And again, it's wider here than it is here. So you're going to be placing your piece here. But you can see how you want to make sure that when you flip it, you're going to catch that corner of the piece. So like I said, I always kind of test flip and see that it's going to be covering. So I'm going to hold that as we flip it over. Put in a pin. And take it over to our machine again. And start on the outside of the unit. Take your pin out. So all the way and a 1/4 inch past. Okay, so there. And when we flip, you can see it's covering that space. So we'll go over and press. Press, flip. Okay, we're getting there. Looking real funny out here, but it's all going to get trimmed up, and then it's not going to look so funny. And so again, we want to trim our seam allowance. So we're going to, in this case, there we go. Trim it down to a 1/4 inch. Okay. And all that's going to get cut off. Okay, then our next piece is piece number 5, and that's over in this corner. Almost done. Let's make these straight out of here. Okay, so piece number 5, again, this is the wide end. So we're going to be laying it on that way. Raw edges even, and do a practice flip. And it looks like that will cover everything. So, over. Put a pin. Bring it to your machine. Make sure no edges are folded under. I've done that before. And then just a 1/4 inch beyond that line, where it goes into number 6. And there you can see piece 5 is easily filled in. So we're gonna press, flip, and trim. And again, get the Whisperlite kind of out of the way so you don't cut it off. and trim. Once I cut that little corner there. Don't do what I do. Okay. Then the last piece is 6. Now, we've got quite a bit overhanging this line at 6. So to even it up a little, I'm going to fold it so that it's at about 1/4 inch and trim that off. So we'll get a more accurate placement when we do that. There, now there's not so much in the way. So then, piece 6, raw edges even. Put a pin to get it over to the machine. And stitch on the line. The line is shared between 6 and 3 and 1. Okay, and ta-da! That line is covered. So, that is a wing. And that, oh, trim the seam. Again, get the Whisperlite out of the way. And we're going to trim this about 1/4 inch. So, foundation piecing allows you to get all these really weird angles. Because if you were to try to cut this out with like templates and put this block together like this without a foundation pattern to follow, it would be a lot more complicated. Okay, so now we're going to trim it on the outside line, and then it's going to look like this. So you trim it on the outside line, and that's our wing section. And I have more. Here's the bee body, and his head, and his other wing, and actually they go that way and goes like this. So all these sections were foundation pieced on Whisperlite. And then I'll just show you on one. You're going to place the sections then right sides together, and you're going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. And that's going to be one of my next tutorials, is making an accurate 1/4 inch seam, which is very important, especially if you're doing a group block. So I'm going to back stitch a couple and then stitch a 1/4 inch seam, these 2 units together. So the Whisperlite stays in place. I'm going to back stitch. The Whisperlite stays there. You don't have to tear it out. And all the components are made for the bee. Okay, see, our bee is coming together. And then we have the head. should have told you. I generally press the seams open because there's a lot of pieces that come together. And so when the units come together like this, I usually press them open. And there's a bee. So, let me press it open like I said. So these seams I would press open. It helps eliminate the bulk because there's a lot of bulk there. So press them open. And I would be using my larger iron for this, but I didn't want to take up all the room on my demo surface here. There we go. So, you don't have to take the foundations out. They stay in. It stabilizes the block because there's a lot of odd angles when you're foundation piecing. So this kind of helps anything from stretching out of shape, the foundation does. So leaving it in is a bonus. And so then we'll spritz this later with water and it'll take out all the blue marks. But there's our bee. And so that's how you foundation piece with Whisperlite. Now let me show you if it were paper. So we had cut this shape out and here's our paper foundation. So remember we have to sew on the side where you see the lines, and so the fabric goes on the opposite side. And the fabric has to be right side up because otherwise it gets hidden by the paper. So you put it on this side, but am I covering the lines? So you kind of have to put it here, then hold it up to the light and see if you can see that you're covering all the lines with your piece, and it's hard to see through. So that is one of the disadvantages of paper piecing. So I think I've got this covered. So let me put a pin in it to hold it. So now there's that piece. And now we need piece 2. So here's our background fabric. And we need it for piece 2. So how are we going to make piece 2? So if you kind of go like this, and then flip it, and then you can kind of see where it is. You could draw a line, but that's a much bigger piece than we cut when we were using the Whisperlite. Because with the Whisperlite, we could really see what we were doing to get our pieces. So we're going to do right sides together again. Okay, so now we go over to the machine and you start a little before the line, and then you stitch on the line through the paper and stop and take it out and stitch and press, flip and press. Okay, so yeah, we cut much too big of a piece, so we can trim some of that away. Okay, and then we have to trim our seam allowance. Do that. Okay, so now we need piece 3, which is that weird shape down there. So, for piece 3, if we did like that, and like that, and because this is a light fabric, I can kind of see through it. So I'll go like that, and that should work for piece 3. But again, they are larger pieces because you really can't see much what you're doing. So again, back to the machine. I'm not going to do the whole thing, but again, sewing through the paper. So sewing through paper will dull your needle faster. So that's a disadvantage. Not being able to see your fabric placement is a disadvantage. And not being able to see your shapes to cut them out more efficiently is a disadvantage. We've got a lot of extra here. And you do get better, you know, the more you do it. But and then again, trim your seam allowance. Okay, so then when you're done with your whole paper piecing, you don't want the paper on there. So then you sit and you have to tear all your paper away. And, you know, when you get all these little sections, there's going to be little corners and stuff like that. And it becomes quite a mess. And also when you're pulling your paper, sometimes you can pop your stitches. And then your seam allowance at the beginning isn't as stable as it was because you popped some stitches pulling the paper out. And it's a mess, and it's tedious. So I'd rather not have to tear out paper. So that is using paper. The other way was using Whisperlite, where you can see what you're doing. You leave it in, don't have to tear it away, and it's there to stabilize all your odd pieces. So give it a try. You can do it. Paper piecing or foundation piecing is definitely a different technique, and it's kind of backwards quilting, the way you stitch on one side and flip it, and it's kind of weird, but a lot of people just love it, and you do get very accurate results with it, you know, very sharp points and corners. That's why you see like a lot of mariners' compasses and things like that. And Judy Niemeyer, she does those amazing compass quilts that have all the little tiny sharp points, and that's all achieved with foundation piecing. And so there's definitely a place for it. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people, well, whatever. And so you can decide, but give this technique a try. I think you will like it, and let me know. Thanks so much. Check my other tutorials. Thank you.